So I'm going to open the meeting. And so I'll call the meeting to order. It's 5:32. And first we're going to look at previous minutes. And so if you take a look at those, if there's any conversation, we can have that. If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Make the motion.
Okay, Morton has made the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved. The next we have the policy reading, which is the second read. Let's see, look at those policies. We have the tobacco, let me get back in there. Tobacco and nicotine containment devices procedure, reimbursement for transportation to alternative independent schools, responsible computer and network, and internet use, Title I, and parent and family engagement procedures. Lynn, I'm noticing that the tuition one wasn't on there.
So this agenda was created before we had that policy meeting because we rescheduled? That's probably why. Because we just did that last week.
We did do that just last week?
I think yeah, it's the 18th, so it would have been last Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
And we were supposed to have had this meeting
Prior to. Okay, so that makes sense. So if there's any conversation around those policies, we can have that. If not, I would entertain a motion to approve those policies. Or if anybody has any questions about them. I believe all of those came to the SU meeting last night.
Motion.
Okay, Sarah makes the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? So moved. Next, we're going to agenda preview and prioritization. Is there anything that we need to shift, Lynn?
I would like to shift, I have something under my agenda. I would like to have Amy Hannibal speak after the spotlight about the student tour
Okay,
proposal.
perfect. Okay. And so that brings us to recognition of public, of visitors and public comment. So I have folks here who want to do that. Amy, you're part of Lynn's agenda, and your folks are here as public comment, or are you just with?
School spotlight.
School spotlight, thank you. And May, you're part of school spotlight too?
May you are part of school spotlight.
Okay, May's like, where am I? Okay. That's
Just
fine.
tell me when to talk, right?
And then, Beth, are you here to?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. If you'd like to comment at this point.
Thank you. Jared Valancourt from Berkshire. I spoke at the other board meeting, so some of you may have already heard this. At your last meeting, the DEI director, Michelle Irish, informed you that an equity audit was to begin immediately and was to be conducted by the Insight Education Group. Comments have been made that it was really important to get outside unbiased perspective. However, the Insight Education Group is anything but unbiased. Vermont's education leaders recently participated in a webinar called Supporting Equity presented by this group. It included information indicating that the concerns and complaints for people who are accustomed to a disproportionate share of access and opportunity are recognized as an indication of progress. The presenter indicated that colorblindness is considered an equity detour, and the phrase, "I don't see color," is insulting to our friends and colleagues of color, because if you don't see their color or their race, then you're actually not seeing them. It's presumptuous to assume this ideology is correct. It reflects the biases held by this group. We've come a long way from when we were taught to judge someone by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. Information further indicated, we refuse to equivocate on racial justice. Educators who resist anti-racist measures should feel uneasy and isolated on the outskirts of their school's institutional cultures. I mean this literally. These educators least invested in racial equity should wonder whether they belong. Our teachers and staff should not be distracted nor feel compelled to validate ideologies, specifically regarding racism and gender identity. They also should not feel silenced if they are opposed to doing so. In an article entitled 5 Key Lessons Learned on Racial Equity in Schools, Insight Education Group's co-founder wrote, examining whiteness must be an essential aspect of the work. I had never reflected on how my whiteness impacted my thinking and my inaction. It is not until we acknowledge the impact of whiteness in the structures of white supremacy that we can truly examine how it has served as a measure against which all other races are compared. Whiteness sits central to the conversation on racial equity. We've been raised in a society that was built on white supremacist beliefs, but then spent centuries pretending this wasn't the case. Now, some people may agree with this ideology and even want to raise their children with it. That's on them. But no one has a right to teach my children or imply to them that because of the color of their skin, they may be responsible for or complicit in creating or perpetuating inequities and white supremacist beliefs. Know that when the results come back from the equity audit compiled by this group, it will have been conducted through their biased lenses as demonstrated in their trainings and writings. Please recognize that there is a link between these ideologies and the negative behaviors that are being seen in our schools. Thank you.
Okay, so then we're going to move on to the school spotlight. And first we have Innersburg Elementary, but that's not.
No.
Okay. And so that brings us to Enosburg Middle High School.
Okay, so in the spirit of being protective of time limitations, I just want to say tonight we have a few representative members of the student body and a coordinator and a teacher who's got another agenda. But we're here to talk a bit about student voice, and there were several students who wanted to come tonight, who were there ready to come last week, but they couldn't come this week to the rescheduled meeting. So you have who's here.
Okay.
And so I just wanted to talk about there are many groups here in the school who are very dedicated to the appropriate increase of student voice around a variety of things. So I'm going to start with Heather, if you could just introduce your program and some of the students who are here tonight to talk about an effort.
Okay, hi. I think I know most all of you, but just in case, Heather, I'm the Leaps After School Project Director for Franklin Northeast, and I'm also the Community Lead for the Enosburg and Richford Vermont Youth Project, which is a 5-year positive youth development project, which we are in year 3 of. And part of that project is to establish youth councils in both the schools, where they receive grant funds to be able to do student organized and designed activities. And the Enosburg Youth Council has something that they would like that we need some board of blessings on. So we have 2 youth council members who were able to be here, Allison and Isaiah, and they would like to give you some more information.
Okay, you're on.
So kind of like the process that led us up to like figuring out what we want to do was, I think we sent out like a survey first to like all the students for just like general ideas and like who was interested in being part of the group. And so then we like selected a few team members and like we all volunteered to be part of it and kind of like narrowed down our choices until like we came up with 2, which one was like the ultimate frisbee course and the other one was like this area down at the park, which Ali will talk about more in a second. But then we kind of we made a survey and sent it out to the Innersburg students just to see like what everyone wanted, and we let everyone vote, and that led us to the project that we're on now.
We really want to make the student voice heard, so voting was very important. What we are planning is doing, by the soccer field, there's a little area down below with like kind of an old volleyball net. We're planning to get a shed down there with outdoor games as well, and put a picnic table maybe down there, just to get that going, and it's open to the public, so a lot of students or like families can go down there whenever they want. And for the shed, it would have like games like cornhole, spike ball, like a bunch of games that maybe some families or kids don't have access to at their own home. And there would be a key for liability, and we would want to put that in the library and have extras for just like liability and responsibility for us. And we just wanted to ask for the space and the possibilities that we have for that.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing idea.
Yeah, they've been working really hard on developing what that space could look like.
Yeah.
So this particular group is a subset of the Vermont Youth Council that Heather has been working very closely with. And so they did some advocacy to get more capacity for fun kinds of activities here in the community. And so they wanted to come and talk with you tonight and let you know what their thoughts are.
Did you have like this idea before you did the survey, or did this completely come out of the survey?
We had a lot of meetings in the group, and like Isaiah said at the beginning of this whole project, we sent out a huge school student survey, and everyone kind of jotted ideas down, so we kind of like picked and choose. A lot of students wanted a place to go, so we kind of brought that into consideration, and they also said fun games, so we decided to like make it open to everyone, and that was the best to do outdoor, so that it was publicly accessible.
Yeah. And so when you talk about the key being in the library, I'm almost wondering if you could partner with like the Innersburg Rec Department, right?
We've been in conversation with Margot, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Or like you could almost put a key at the library, right? So that the public could access it during the weekend.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. I love that. Yeah.
So do you want to just give them a little information about the funding piece for how you're going to have the money to do the shed and the games?
We also got Cold Hollow, we're both part of Cold Hollow, so we've been talking to Mr. Hungerford, which is the construction teacher. We're hoping to get students to create the shed, maybe a picnic table, so it's almost all student built. So that would all be from Cold Hollow, and we would of course fund them. And then we have a 2,500 grant, and that grant would go to the games and just fixing up down there, because we need to get a new net. There is 2 stands already down there, and we have to scope out how the yard is and see if we need to put maybe sand or different grass there. Yeah.
I love how you not only took the initiative as students to pursue this idea, but that you felt the importance of getting your peers involved in getting their voices heard too. And I'm just really proud that that's something that you did, because I think that that's how we can make things happen in schools. And I love that you're centering your student voices to tell the adults what it is you want, what it is you need, and how you're going to make it happen. So well done.
I also love the fact that you were thinking about the public too, and that there's families who don't have access to those games. I mean, some of us who like grow up in the country, right, and have like the tree forts and all of that, like a lot of kids don't get that. And so that's great.
So it's like early efforts to do some of the portrait of a graduate work of engagement with community and aligning the community with the school more and more, which we've been doing over the last 3 years. This particular youth council works we're actually looking at further collaboration with another group who couldn't come tonight called PEP, and they are Peers Empowering Peers. That's another group that gets student voice to the surface and gets things moving here in the school. And both groups have talked about coming to the board meetings more often to talk about things so that you're informed by students themselves rather than school leaders coming and doing the work for them. So that's what we're trying to build, the student leadership. Okay.
So you needed our blessing. Oh, you have one more.
Yeah, and
Okay.
also, Heather, you're going to be emailing board members. some
Yes, so I
material.
have some, because I realize some of you weren't on the board when I gave some presentations on the Vermont Youth Project and what that is and all of the details of that. So I have an email that I'm about to hit send on, so it'll have a couple of infographics on that. It does include yearly student surveys about their perspectives of growing up in their communities, and I just got the survey results, and so we'll start unpacking and sharing them. Will be more presentations in the coming months of what that looks like. So I'll be sending out some more information, and definitely send me an email if you want to know anything more. Also point out May was on it last year, was part of the council and started off this year too. It's and we have students in Richford. Also, they're doing another project on hockey sticks that they want to get for the ice rink that the youth councils put in last year in Richford.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to be, are we good to go with our project? We're going to try to get that if possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you.
Very good. Okay, we have another student guest who actually has one foot in one world, one foot in the other. It's May Lander, who is a senior, who will be graduating next month. May not tell you this herself, but she was this year's recipient, one of the recipients of the Vermont Scholar Award. Is that the correct, what's the,
Presidential scholar.
the Presidential Scholar Award, and May, you will be going, I understand, to the University of Ottawa next year, is that correct?
Still undecided.
Still undecided, okay. Anyway, how about if you tell us all what you've been engaged in over the past year in the organization here in Vermont that you've been involved with?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been involved with the VSARN, which is the Vermont Student Anti-Racism Network, and we have a bunch of, and we're a student-led organization that endeavors to educate ourselves and others about race, oppression, and privilege. We have a bunch of projects going on currently, but one of the projects that I'm a part of is called Diversifying Literature, which aims to bring more diverse books into schools. And the two books that we have chosen are Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi and The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. Both of these authors are Black women, and the main characters are also Black. The goal of this project is to just increase awareness, bring a different perspective, and increase the representation of people of color, specifically the Black community. I think this will be especially beneficial to Innersburg because, as we all know, Enosburg is a predominantly white school. This project is being implemented differently in each school based on the needs, but Enosburg will be doing a summer reading project, an optional summer reading project, and we will be incentivizing it to encourage students to read the books. These books will be property of the schools, and it is our hope that they reuse them, and hopefully they will be integrated into the curriculum eventually. We will also have discussion ATs the next year for anybody who wants to join to discuss the books. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions? But I used to teach Homegoing. It's a great book. If anybody hasn't read it, it's a really good. And Vanishing Half is also a great book too. Big fan. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I want to celebrate you for a second because May just finished her first year of college and she's wrapping up her senior year also at the same time, and I appreciate your work on this. And I think that, one of the things, you were quoted in an article earlier in the year, or might have been last year, about having pretty singular representation in terms of the types of books that you've been exposed to in high school. So I love seeing this connection to you recognizing that and being able to talk about not having opportunities to read and see varied characters within the stories that you were exposed to. So for you to then bring it to this level where you're working to advocate for other representation, I really appreciate that. And thank you for your work on that.
Thank you.
Very important. Oh, great. Yeah. Any questions?
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thanks, May. You don't have to stay at school longer than you have. Thank you.
Thank you
very
again.
much.
Thank you.
Polly, I'm recognizing that you have 4 board members, and I think you have one that has to be like 6.
Devin is showing up at 6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there she is. Yeah,
you're good.
exactly.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind. Hi, Devin.
10 minutes early.
Good.
So that brings us to Amy.
Sure, yeah. I wish I'd brought a student. I think it's so wonderful to see that initiative coming from there. So I will just start by introducing myself. My name is Amy Hennebel. I'm a French teacher at Enosburg-Richford High School. I started in November of 2020, so mid-pandemic, coming from a background where I lived in Switzerland for 15 years, doing studies there. And so as I got started going, imagining travel the first year, I knew that there was the desire there, the students, but it didn't seem possible at all because of COVID. But then this year I started thinking, maybe I could imagine something for next year. And I also started getting emails. Some of the emails I got were from EF, who's a company that I personally did a 6-month exchange with them in my junior year of high school. So I know that they're really trustworthy and have good programs, and started communicating with one of their representatives about organizing a tour. One of the advantages of being at both high schools is I could, take kids from Richford and Enosburg, and do two schools in one. I think it would be great to help inspire, and we're kind of trying to build up the French program here after some, lower sign-up rates. And then I also started talking to the Spanish teacher at Richford, and she said, oh, well, I want to go. Her name's Heather Harder. So anyway, it's sort of been, I sort of was like, the idea, then it sort of has picked up speed. The one thing I did feel some pressure to introduce it relatively quickly, because there are better deals if we manage, the more students we can get signed up before June 1st would be best. So I have emailed the plan. I also wish I could have had some slides to show you the program. I found a program that includes Paris and Spain, so that sort of would make some Spanish students happy too. The good thing about EF is they really help you with getting people signed up and also fundraising. It is a kind of pricey, I also, when I saw it, I was like, oh, not sure how many families will be able to afford that, but what I like about EF is they do have a lot of help with the fundraising. So each student gets to have a personal GoFundMe page, and then as I was talking to colleagues, Heather has also, she was teaching in Indiana for years and had done a lot of fundraising events, like a spaghetti dinner, she mentioned to me. So there's those opportunities too of doing something and earning money around it that way. So mostly I would just like your blessing to get started going with the fundraising, and hopefully we can see it happen in June of 2023. So I'm happy to answer any questions or tell you more about the trip or whatever you need to know.
I'm so jealous. I had set up an EF through EF,
Oh,
a trip to England, because I was an English teacher, and in 2001. So September 2011.
Wow.
And then
No.
I denied. So I'm so jealous that you get to pull these kids together
Yeah,
and
hopefully
go
it'll
on those
work,
trips.
and there won't be any other,
No,
big.
exactly.
I can mention too, EF does have certain, policies, that if something happens and the tour isn't possible, 40 days before we can call it off. The leader would be me, can call it off. There's also personal coverage that students can purchase if they want even more assurance. But it seems like a pretty low risk.
There was language in there that was specific to if something was happening across
Exactly.
the globe, that it appeared that travel was going to be less safe, that, that would be a reason that we
That
could.
would be a reason.
So one of the questions that I had asked Amy and Heather when they sent this along was about the financial obligation of this. It's about $4,000.
$4,000 for the tour, yeah.
For
About a
each
9-day tour.
student. So
For every 6 students, there's a free chaperone.
So one of the things that was important to me that you consider is ways that you can make this trip accessible to more students and families, because we do serve a population of students. We have quite a lot of our families who are economically disadvantaged. So I think that, the research that you did around the GoFundMe page and other opportunities for the fundraising, when you advertise this to families, will you be communicating also about the opportunities there will be to fundraise and the monthly payment plan?
Definitely, definitely, that's all included. EF has, I looked at it briefly, but they have email outlines of what to say, how to present it, and how to talk about the affordability of it.
The neat thing for me, I had a personal experience in my own. My son was able to go on a tour like that in his freshman year and in his junior year. He made a nice connection with one of the host families, and he took a gap year with one of those families between his senior year of high school and his freshman year of college. In that extra year, not only did he perfect his French, but it gave him the maturity that he was really seeking and college readiness when he came back. The other thing I said, we have foreign exchange students who come to Richford and Enosburg, and our students get to intermingle and socialize with kids from other countries. This would be a great opportunity for our students to get out of their zip code and get over to a foreign country, immersed in a culture, and there's no telling what kind of seeds can get planted, and I think that's really great. I'm so excited you're getting to do this.
Yeah, I had a wonderful experience in my high school experience, being able to go overseas, and as I said, have spent a lot of my life overseas, probably also as a result of that 6-month trip when I was younger. But I think too, I feel the kids are really hungry for that now, and they really want new experiences that are gonna help them open up to the world, and even if maybe sometimes they don't know how to express that curiosity or that interest, I really feel there is a kind of longing of like, and some do say, oh, I really want to go. I have students that say today, I really want to go to France, and I think it'll motivate them too in their studies. Not just, French obviously are their languages, but also just of their curiosity to know more about the world and what's going on there.
Well, the internet has brought them to the world and the world to them.
Right.
So I think more and more youth are starting to see themselves as potentially citizens of the world in addition to be Americans.
Yeah,
American
that's true
Americans.
too.
And EF is the company that most of our exchange students
Mhm.
come to our schools from.
Yep.
I think I noticed that too.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're also familiar with that.
Questions or comments? No, yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Wish
Good
you
luck.
luck.
Good
Hopefully.
luck.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you
Thank you
for
very much.
listening, and thank you for your blessing on the project.
For sure.
If anyone has a chance to ever visit Amy's classroom, she's created France up there and other countries, French-speaking people, but your students really love you and you're a lot of fun, so
Thanks.
that's so clear.
Been trying to make it fun for them.
We show up with their baguettes.
Yeah. We got to make cut this week with my smaller class. That was
Oh,
really
awesome.
fun.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. Great. So Morgan, you were up next.
So everything I brought tonight is informational.
Okay.
And I'll hop in on the ones that from time to time.
Okay. So that brings us to Lynn.
So I will hold it to those and I'll look. Sorry. I think there was incoming information that I hadn't seen before the board meeting, so
Okay.
I'll look at it and we'll bring it up under Rachel's part. So there were some updates since the agenda went out to all of you because this meeting was rescheduled. So I'm going to go through the hiring piece. These are action items. Not all of them are action items, but we'll take them as a group, if you're okay. So Cold Hollow Career Center, Emily Kimball, for the teacher in Human Services program, that new program there. Enosburg Elementary School, Melissa McKinstry moving into the library enrichment position. Chelsea Menz-Cole in grade 1, Amy Callan Jarvis in grade 2. Tanya Caswell is going to be staying, she currently works there as a classroom teacher, staying there and will be funded locally for math intervention position. Megan Tomlinson, grade 3, she's currently filling in as a kindergarten long-term substitute teacher. Enosburg Middle School, you have a new middle school softball coach, Ryan Wells. Enosburg High School, Heather Hawkins, assistant principal. Jonah Frank, high school science. Ann Hull, halftime PE. Kaylee Maddox, spring track and field. Zachary Chamberlain, high school social studies. At Richford Elementary School, Alicia Lawyer, pre-K. Ashlyn Quigley, school counselor. Annalise Davis, paraeducator. Richford Junior Senior High School, Jenny Hull, high school science, 0.8 FTE. Merle Devereaux, middle school ELA. And Kelly Legassi is going to be hired, she's going to be funded through the grant, will be working at Richford High School as a literacy interventionist. So ask the board to.
What about the music teacher?
Last time, yeah, Camille Stevens, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, I would entertain a motion to approve those if there's no conversation.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Morton's made the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, next.
So you have resignations, Misty McCartney at Enosburg Elementary, Amber Renadette. Do I need to say the positions or can I just say the names to speed this along?
Yeah.
Lisa Robtoy is coming out of the classroom but is staying in the school into a grant position. Enosburg High School, Aaron Poussin, Brian Garvey, Andrew Besso, and Jen Doyle. Richford Elementary, Emmeline Freeman, Kim Atkinson, Emily Fleury, Diana Springfield, Catherine Villatoro, Cody Robarge, Karina Stanley. Emily Kimball at Richford Junior Senior High School, Emily Kimball, Marty Valander. He's moving to an SU position. Melissa Miller and Corbin Irwin in Tom Barnum. So several of those are moves within the SU. There are a couple of people who have decided to formally retire at this point, kind of a second retirement. I saw Karina Stanley in there. I felt like there was one other. That's all informational.
Okay.
We still have many open positions in the schools, so that is, do you want me to say those positions or
I don't
keep
think
it?
so. We have them.
So the staff extensions is no longer, we're past the due date, so
Okay.
everyone who's staying is known. People have returned their contracts at this point. Any question on personnel? So under student, we have each year by May 1st, people need to let us know if they wish to apply for in-district transfer. So this would be between Enosburg Elementary and Richford Elementary, or Enosburg Middle School and Richford Junior High. So this year we had 3 students only that applied for this, and it's from Richford Elementary to Enosburg Elementary. So we have one family that's moving over. No other transfers. Next up, I want to just talk a moment about PCB testing. So I think that you've probably by now all heard that the state is requiring all schools built before 1980 to undergo PCB testing. So for us in FNESU, that's every school except Bakersfield and Montgomery. So we have a schedule that we received in late April with the date ranges of when schools are going to be tested for PCBs. So the testing in the original bill was all covered, and they have just recently put some money in for remediation. So up until the last week, there was nothing allocated for remediation. So for what we know right now, if schools find greater than the allowable level of PCB and there's remediation that's needed, there's $22 million in the state budget, but we cannot access that until after January, unless there's a significant emergency. So for us, I just want to talk about implications. Richford Elementary School is up first. They're actually being tested next week. The state did a kind of a ranking of schools, and then they divided them by that ranking and put them into different quarters for the next several years. So Enosburg Elementary will be next up. it really is all of our elementary schools, because Sheldon and Berkshire are with them July through September. Their testing window is this year, July through September. So we'll know sometime in the fall what implications there are for all of our elementary schools in terms of mitigation measures. Richford Junior Senior High School will be October to December in 2023. Cold Hollow will be that second quarter of 2024. And Enosburg Middle High School will be the third quarter of 2024. So we're within range, you know, they're within like a 6-month period or a year period once we get up to the tech center and the 2 high schools. So some of those dates may change on those that are being tested further out, but for right now, our most urgent intention is on thinking about what our response plan will be if we find that there are unacceptable levels of PCB in our school. We know that there have been adjustments to the allowable levels of PCBs. The most notably, when we think about PCBs, what happened in Burlington, and Vermont had set a standard that was more rigorous than the EPA standard. So since that time, Vermont has matched the EPA standards. So there are some allowable levels, and what we saw recently in information that was sent our way is the allowable levels are dependent upon the age of the students in the buildings that are served in the buildings. So we are going to commit to being completely transparent when the testing results come out. We'll communicate as quickly as we can, and then we'll work through any kind of mitigation measure that we need to put in place. We don't know if someone tests positive, if that means they have to close and no kids, or are they, is there a level where we still could have the schools operating in person while some of the mitigation is happening. So we won't know that until we go through the testing part, but just in terms of, you know, thinking strategically, we're obviously spending a little time thinking about, you know, what ifs. What if this happens? What would our plan be? We don't really have great plans because we don't have the benefit that Burlington did. If, you know, they had a mall sitting empty. Right, so we don't really have that, but we will have to be really strategic and thoughtful about what options we have, and creative, like we've never had to be if this comes down. But we'll, for now, look at this optimistically and be hopeful that we'll be fine with our testing results. But just wanted to make sure that the board was aware and the community's aware that this is what's coming for us. So I'm not going to say much about legislative update. The session has just wrapped up. We're expecting the last legislative blog that kind of gives us the overall summary. So what I'm sharing with you is the last known that I have, and there could have been changes in those final hours. And we know that there's a lot of the stuff that went through that's still with the governor. So the weighting study, which we've talked a lot about, in the end of the legislative session, they decided that they were going to 1 year delay the change to the weights. So rather than that going live in 23-24, they delayed and intend now to go live in 24-25. Okay? So the other thing that I think I know about the weights is that where they landed in the end was, I had talked to you previously this year about there being a, you know, as they're making this transition to the different weights, the systems that were going to benefit from the weights would get like 20% of the benefit in year 1 and 40% in year 2 and so on. It'd be a 5-year transition. And those who are going to not benefit from the weights would have the same slow transition away from the resources that they have. So they've actually shifted that thinking now. So people who are benefiting from weights would get the benefit of all the money in year 1. And the people who are not benefiting from the shift in weights would have that 5-year kind of on-ramp of reduced revenue or reduced resources. So anything went on to that? There are special ed rule changes that happen really late in the legislative session. So there are 2 parts, and we don't need to go really deep about that. But there are two that are connected to State Board of Ed rules. One is around specific learning disabilities and no longer meeting the discrepancy model for special education. And also the other is about adverse effect in special education and adding some, I cannot explain this to you the way Michelle DeBerge can, so I'm giving you high level. If you have questions and want more information, she's your girl. But adding functional skills is something that's going to be new. So that has been delayed 1 year. So we got good news about the yield. So the yield is going to work in our favor this year. So where they landed on the yield bill is that will be 3 to 4 cents to the good in terms of what we anticipated in terms of tax rate. So I'm recognizing that Devin and Shaylee have probably never interacted with what yield is. So do you want to give a crack at that?
So, yeah, the quick walkthrough, and this is gonna change a little bit in 2 years from now, is that you, the board, set the budget, and that's how much you're gonna spend and how much money you think you're gonna take in grants and tuition and things like that. The difference between that is called the ed spending amount, and that's the amount of money that you need to get from the state to run your schools for that year. We then get a number called equalized pupils, which is tied to the weighting study that Lynn mentioned. Basically, they take a 2-year average of your student population. They give more weight to kids that are theoretically more expensive to educate and less weight to those who are less expensive to educate. You come up with a number and you divide your ed spending by those pupils, and that gives you ed spending per pupil. And in theory, that number can be compared to any school district in the state. So if we spend $16,000 per equalized pupil, and maybe Stowe spends $20,000, and so their tax rate eventually is going to be higher than ours. So from the ed spending per pupil, the legislature sets a yield amount, and a yield is how much money that $1 on the tax rate raises. So if your per pupil spending is $16,000 and they set a yield of $16,000, then your tax rate would be $1 before it goes into the COA. So when the legislature pushes the yield up, your tax rate goes down and vice versa. When we warn our budgets in January, we have old data to work with on the yield number. It's a number that the state sets in December. We all kind of know that it's going to change, and we don't know which direction it's going to change. It tends to be a little bit more conservative than reality ends up being. So for the last 3 or 4 years, we would end up warning a budget that would predict a tax rate at X, and then the legislature, especially in an election year, likes to come in and raise the yield and say they just reduced your taxes by 4 cents. So that's where we are this year. I think for Innersburg it was 3.5. For Enosburg-Richford combined, it was 3.5 cents better than what we warned. And then the impact's a little different because Innersburg and Richford have different levels of increase.
So you can see the trick in passing a budget on hypothetical numbers, basically. So you say, for instance, this one, we're like, oh, it's going to be up 5 cents, but then the yield comes in and it's actually only up a penny. So it's like, but really all people are noticing is when they open their tax bill, what do they have to pay? Is it more or less? We just hope that it hovers about the same or less, right?
Vermont has one of the most complicated
I know.
education
I'm
funding
like, it
systems.
doesn't go anywhere.
It's very
It
hard.
does not make sense. Okay.
So we'll take good news out of
Yeah,
legislative
exactly.
session. The other piece is the universal lunch. So the legislature did end up funding it for 1 year, I believe out of the ed fund, and what they did was they created a working group, and part of the task of the working group is to work on an income declaration form. Right now, we can request families fill out free and reduced lunch forms and get that information back, but we can't mandate it. And because this is going to be tied to a lot. It's gonna have an impact on, definitely gonna have an impact on our weights, because that's how we'll determine our levels of poverty within our communities. Will have the ability to mandate that we get those forms back. So they're working at that, and then their intention is from that working group is to go back to the start of the legislative session and look for different funding streams to continue to be able to offer universal meals. So that's what we know about that. And I think that's all I really need to say about legislative session, unless anybody has any other questions. Okay. So I had on here an update on negotiations, and since I have to write this so far in advance of meetings, and this meeting was supposed to be a week ago, this is old news. But we settled with the teachers union for a 3-year agreement under board business. Morgan is going to be talking you through the ratification of that collective bargaining agreement, so I'll skip right past that. At the last meeting, I had talked to you about Richford Elementary School and making some changes and adding some positions to better support the students at Richford. So one of the things that we have added, and please know that these are moving targets, that this is what I know today, and it's different today than it was yesterday, because, you know, we've hired some different people, and now the need might look a little different depending on who we've added. So our intention was to have a math interventionist added in at the elementary school, so we can have more support, more academic support for students. And I think that one, Morgan, can you help me with the funding source, because I did not track that back. I think that was out of ESSER.
I think I would be more comfortable saying we're gonna fund these positions out of a combination of ESSER, CFP, and
the
local
local
money,
money, okay.
depending on sort of what is eligible to be funded under the ESSER and CFP buckets, and also what is considered to be permanent versus, you know, maybe a 3-year trial.
The other piece is a part-time assistant principal and someone that can help with SEL coordination at the school, both SEL coordination and SEL intervention. So that's something we've posted. We haven't talked about candidates yet about that. And right now, Kelly has a half-time school counselor that she was sharing with Montgomery, and Montgomery ended up increasing their school counselor time to full-time. That counselor went there. So we've added half-time school counselor to Kelly, so not to Kelly, to Richford Elementary School. So that's one area that has been really challenging, because we have been looking for school-based clinician for over a year. We haven't been able to fill that position. Right. The hiring piece is really tough right now. But thankfully, you found a full-time school counselor. So I think that some of the areas that we identified that we needed some extra professional support, we can fill these positions. It feels like that it'll be what, you know, the system will be positioned better in support of students. So, do you have any questions on that? And that is all I have.
Wow, fancy. Okay, so now that brings us to the principals. And so, let me get back up there. Kelly, you're up. Is there anything you'd like to add?
That's all information.
Perfect. Beth, anything like that?
No, except we want to decide who's presenting diplomas at the Richford graduation. I assume it might be Mort, since he has a son who's graduating, but I
Sure.
don't like to make assumptions.
Yes, yeah, right. I think that's it. And so we need to talk about that as Janice?
Yes.
Oh, that's your, okay. So, and then Jen's not here. Rachel?
Yeah, I have one addition, so, I had a staff request, a staff member, am I allowed to, how much am I allowed to say?
You can say it.
Okay, so I have, a staff member who has used up all of her sick time for the school year, and needs additional, she needs board approval to use unpaid time should she
be out again. She was out on, once this week already, beyond her allotted bank.
So is that the first day that she did not have leave available?
Yes.
And is that counting, remember we gave additional?
That's everything.
That's everything.
That's everything.
Okay.
So I'm reading this and that's what we were whispering about because I hadn't seen this yet.
Okay.
Apologies, it came to me late.
It's open-ended, and I don't love open-ended requests, like there's no, I'm requesting an unpaid leave date for, what I see in there is, so she missed a day this week, and then there's a couple mornings that she's gonna need to be out because she's interviewing. So if the board's going to consider approving the unpaid leave, I would encourage you to not make it open-ended and say, have at it, like, yeah. We give you X number of days and then you have to come back and make another request, or if you have an emergency, you don't have to go beyond it.
Yeah. How many do you think? 5 unpaid? Yes?
We did 5 before.
I think so.
Like 5.
I say,
Not more than 5.
yeah, what do you think, Devin? If you're,
I think 5's fair. To me, it depends on the reason. I
Right.
don't think we're allowed to ask the reason, so.
I know so historically, we've gotten to this before where we were looking at reasons and then it's like, well, okay, is somebody's wedding more important than somebody's, whatever, like somebody's birth of their niece? And so we were finding that we were trying to be like the judge and jury, and so we either say, yes, we approve days, or no, we don't approve days. And
Right.
so,
Well, it's hard for me, right? Because
Yeah.
if somebody's going through cancer treatment,
Right.
5 days is not enough.
right.
Right, so I kind of look at it medically,
Yeah.
of course.
No,
If,
yeah.
and if it were something of that nature, we would hope they would be moving through
FMLA.
FMLA rather
Yeah,
than.
exactly.
So that's
People
the
don't
trick,
always
is that we
Yeah.
have,
Right.
if it's a FMLA qualifying event like that,
Yeah.
we can ask other staff members to donate days. But in this
Oh,
situation,
good, okay.
it is not FMLA qualifying, and it's kind of, predicting that there will be more days required. I mean, we certainly could say if this is for legitimate, you have to interview and this is the only time that you can interview, or you are legitimately sick, or your child is legitimately sick. Because the other thing is, I have empathy for all of our educators, and at the same time, our students need our people in schools. And I know this has been a challenging year, and people have had to miss because of COVID. So I just wouldn't want it to be so many days that
No, yeah,
it's more
exactly.
days that our kids aren't getting
No, for sure.
their teachers.
So I say we set, an entertained motion to set the unpaid leave for 5 days, and after that, they would have to petition the board again. Anybody wants to-
Make a motion.
Mark makes the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Anything else, Rachel, you have?
No, just to plug that I'm very happy that other people have found school counselors, but I continue to seek one. And
Right.
I also have no applicants, and if you know of anyone.
I'm on in Tokyo.
Okay, well, I didn't know I had to look in Tokyo. That's like brand new information.
There are a
So,
lot of.
I guess I'll
overseas
expand my search
applicants.
parameters a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am just, fingers crossed, I keep reminding myself I wasn't hired until my birthday, which is tomorrow, by the way. So there are good people who apply like late in May, so it can be okay. You
I
can get there.
the last school counselor I hired when I was principal, I hired on convocation day.
Yeah,
and
so it
interviewed.
can work out great,
Yeah.
and I am just hopeful that the right person is just about to walk through the door, so it's gonna happen.
You want me to start going to school for it?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, please, seriously, like anyone interested, go to UD, there's an informational meeting next week at
Nice.
6 p.m.
So that leaves us to Joseph.
For me, it's just annual milestones, celebrations, similar to what Beth reminded me. Yes, I'm hoping Rick keeps his promise and gives out diplomas this year.
Oh,
So
yeah,
he
right.
would be, I think he's going to be the board, but we need confirmation on that.
Okay.
And
You want me to get better for you
I don't.
next year?
No.
No, 2 years.
yeah, I call him Senator Bartholomew because he comes
Oh, does he
looking
come,
like a
oh,
senator.
we're getting,
Yeah, I
oh,
guess
that's
that's not
great.
true.
I'm gonna have to up my game this year.
There you go.
Just kidding.
Okay.
So we have received approval and authorization to hold graduation in the park again this year, and we have approval to have the parade following. So it's the
Okay.
third annual parade we just had approved. And we had an absolutely wonderful, successful, without incident prom last Saturday night at the Abbey. First dance we were able to have this year.
Yeah, that's great.
It was wonderful. Kids, it was great to see all the kids showing up in every kind of get-up you can think of, and it was wonderful.
Nice.
Great.
Great.
Yeah.
So that brings us, and Nate's not here.
I have two things from Nate.
Oh, you do, Okay.
He wanted me to remind the board to read the CLNA thing that was in your packet.
Yeah.
It is, but please read it. And then on the construction work going on at Cold Hollow, the site work for the future sugar house and future construction trades building right on that lot is almost ready to go out to bid. He's had an informal estimate given to him of about $50,000 for that entire piece of the project, and he wanted to ask for authority to use capital reserve funds not to exceed 70, because we don't know where those bids will come in. I will say that we're also working on updating his gear grant application, and we're hopeful that about 40,000 of it will come from that.
In addition, or
Instead,
instead of?
but we don't have the approval yet.
Gotcha. So if that grant were to come in, then you would take less capital reserve money?
Possibly none, depending on
Right,
where
yeah,
the
where
bids
that
actually
goes.
go.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, you're good with that? So if everybody's okay with that, I don't know, do we need a motion? Yeah.
Yeah, a motion to allow use of up to
potential
$70,000 for sign
Okay. Motion. Sarah makes the motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. And, oh, for people who came on, 2 years ago, we had a surplus at the end of our fiscal year where we had this extra money, and we asked the voters if we could take some of that money and put it in a capital reserve fund for building projects, because we know that we have projects, right? And so that's what, I should have done this before we did the vote, I apologize. So Nate is asking if he can use some of that money for a potential sugar house build for Cold Hollow.
Right.
Yeah, so, okay, yep,
Yep.
okay.
I think we mentioned that. a
Did we?
couple of meetings
Okay, I
ago, yeah.
wasn't sure, okay. I lose track. And so that brings us to board business. The next regularly scheduled meeting is June 14th. What day is graduation? The 11th? 11th.
Saturday morning.
Saturday morning. And so that would be at Richford is our next meeting. correct?
The 10th for us. Ours is the 10th.
It's the 10th?
Theirs is the 11th.
Oh,
Right.
that's right, you do it the Friday night.
We do it Friday
Right, You
night,
don't do it
yeah.
the same day. Okay. And then, let's see, teachers' negotiations, so that's potential ratification of those.
Do you want to tee that up, or do you want me to?
You can go ahead.
So, after 4 meetings, some of them, all of them were actually pretty appealing. We came to an agreement with the teachers' union. We are now in the process of bringing that agreement to the 3 boards here, and they are bringing it to their membership sometime next week, I believe. To give you the very high-level look, and I did share these documents in emails, so you've got the agreement and the side letters, as well as a markup copy that shows the changes. The very high-level picture is that we put a significant amount of money on the table for the teachers. We are getting an extra day, extra work day in year 3. we were getting the ability to send out contracts 2 weeks earlier. So instead of us saying, this is the week when we know who your teaching staff is,
Yeah.
we'll be able to know that 2 weeks earlier. That, I think, is a significant non-monetary benefit for you, and was one of the last things that we were able to finish up. There's some other small language changes, but those are the big ones. And then to talk about the money, when we went into this cycle, we looked at the master agreements from the other schools, other districts in Franklin, Grand Isle. We looked at the two in Lamoille, Lamoille North. We looked at North Country, and out of those, so there are 8 districts there, and we were second to the bottom in terms of what we paid. So we were trying to get out of the basement, and there were one negotiation board member who was especially focused on that. Several of those districts haven't settled yet, but we at least know that we're not going to be second to last.
Right.
We, in the first year of the agreement that we settled, we froze steps and put everything on the base, and so teachers are still getting a lot of money, but we are able to steer it towards what we would hire new teachers for. So going into next hiring season, we're going to be significantly more competitive than we were going into this hiring season. So that's all good news.
That's huge. I think you're hearing that from your principals as they do these reports when we're looking for candidates. I mean, part of it is the workforce shortage. The other part is wage. So it was important, and you all as a board during your February meetings voted, or you didn't vote, we talked about the strategies to improve that compensation to be more competitive, and I think we got ourselves in a much better place by the time we get out to that 3rd year.
For sure. I do think we need to think about, though, it's like we work to recruit, but now we have to work to retain because of those freezes. If you just go to another district, they just give you your years, right?
Not all.
Not all.
A lot of our language is modeled after Maple Run's language, and there are other places that have language like for every year you get a half step. So there a lot of places have placement language. It's not year for year.
No, for sure. But like, for instance, we took steps and we froze and we put them on the base, right? And then we just froze again. So somebody who's in year 6 is now on year 3 and could go to another district and get year 6. Is what I'm saying. It's like, so
But
there's.
they can't necessarily go get year 6 because Maple Run has the same language that we do, so they cap it. And there are places that do 2 for 1.
At above 6.
So we've actually had, I won't say who's
Yeah.
staff member it is,
Yeah.
even though I'm pointing in that
Okay.
direction. We've already heard from staff members who, before this was settled, left because they were getting a better deal somewhere and they're making less than if they were the same.
Right, okay.
So it's a much more
It's-
nuanced
Right, nuance for
conversation.
sure.
I
It's
hear-
really
But I
very
guess
hear what you're
freezing
saying.
piece is like, that's the part, I guess. which we
So
just
I
need to
think that
stop,
the
yeah.
difficult part is there were so many freezes,
Yeah.
in the last decade and a
exactly.
half. Like, we're not talking about things that have just happened.
Right.
You can't
No,
really
I know.
make up for all of that and put enough money on the base to attract new teachers. So it's substantial money, because it had to be to get there. I think that in terms of the retention, there's definitely work we need to do about that. And at the same time, one of the things that's important for our teachers to recognize is we're actually, very generous with how we are treating our off-step teachers. Because in other places, once you get off-step, you get a much lower raise than what teachers who are on-step are getting. And that's been something that we've historically tried to make equal.
Right.
So I hear what you're saying, and at the same time, it's apples and oranges in the master agreements because there's so many different language pieces that make a difference about the overall compensation.
No, for sure. I'm just saying, like, I'm just saying, this was the focus for this one round. I'm just wondering if next time we maybe like just look at pieces.
We did try to focus on both.
Yeah.
I'm not trying
No, I
to
know,
defend about
yeah.
it, but that was the hard part, is that the goals had to be centered on both. So in order to do the retention piece, they do get steps in year 2 and year 3. The board only negotiated one freeze.
No, right. No, I
And
get
then the stuff about where the off-step teachers landed was another part of the big deal. I think we will continue to need to keep our eye on recruitment
that.
and retention.
Retention.
Because I think that
As
the
long as there's
recruitment,
carrots around, then that's
Right.
where I worry. Right,
the issue is other people are gonna continue to accelerate their base.
right.
So we're here.
No, I know.
And this is where we are, and we're in a good place right now. But by the time we get out to year 3, we'll have to look again to
Yeah.
see where our comps are.
I gotcha.
And we're not only trying to recruit teachers, we're trying to recruit people to become teachers.
Yeah, no.
And if people have, like, for example, our industrial art position, you want somebody with a bachelor's degree that has that subset of skills. And if you don't, if there isn't anybody licensed, then chances are there isn't. A lot of people are taking a big cut in pay to become a teacher.
No, for sure, out of the industry,
Right.
for sure.
And we're trying to get them out of industry,
Yeah,
we're
I know.
we're competing with other fields for
For
sure.
sure.
No.
Nope, I know it's
Both are
confusing. SU board report, it was kind of the same, the only,
Well, we are gonna probably.
oh, sorry, I jumped ahead, I'm sorry. Just trying to get out of that conversation. Okay,
So if you're so inclined, it would be great to have a motion to ratify the collective bargaining
Okay.
agreement with the teachers and direct the chair to sign the contract and the associated side letters.
make the motion. So Sarah made the motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? So moved. SU board report, so it's kind of the same, what everything you just heard tonight, except the spotlights were from Heather Hawkins, the SEL, the Social Emotional Learning Coordinator. And she talked about the district's priority standards around social emotional learning. What else did we have? Let's see. Everything else was kind of the same.
You approved the portrait of a graduate.
Oh, there we go. Approved a portrait of a graduate and the different categories and the indicators within those. However, there may be some slight changes in the final draft. What else?
You approved the priority standards, the portrait of a graduate. There was some stuff that was not nearly as interesting as that. It presented to you draft board goal monitoring thing.
Oh, yes. Oh, superintendent evaluation, right? We talked about the, handed out a draft of a new job description and an evaluation based off the job description. And the job description is modeled after the Vermont School Boards Association draft job description. And, yeah, right? Yeah, that's it. Okay, set future agenda items. Is there anything we need to add to the agenda? No? And then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Me, kidding.
You want to stay, Devin?
Yeah.